Join me today as we pull out some polymer clay and make some pears for the dolls. I'm really pleased with how these came out, and I hope you enjoyed the process too. So stay tuned and see how these are made. Alright, just like always, the first step in making a piece of miniature fruit is, if at all possible, look at the real thing. And I picked up this gorgeous pear at my grocery store the other day, and I thought it had ripened to such a beautiful color. We are going to make a couple of pears for the dolls to have in their fruit bowl we've been working on. Now, ignore the blotchy spots where I peeled the little label off and stuck my thumbnail in it. But this is a beautiful pear. So we look at the size. We look at the shape, and some pears are more, shall we say, pear-shaped than others. This one is kind of more an oval. It's got a good shape to it. It's got a stem on this end. It's kind of to the side. It's got a little puckering around it. We've got the blossom end down here. It's got little ridges there, and it's not completely smooth. It's kind of bumpy. So we're going to use, and what I'm using again this week is original Sculpey. Now you could use a regular white clay. I wouldn't use a colored clay for this. Now this is going to be a pear that is designed to sit in the fruit bowl. It's not going to be shown cut open. If you would like, we can do another series of videos later where we do some cut fruit. I believe the apple video I did a couple of years ago had both versions on it. Right now I want to concentrate on just the outside unless I have something that really would benefit, like I've had a request for kiwi, which we will do a kiwi fruit, and that one I'll do a sliced one too. But for the pear, it's going to be the whole pear. So we're starting out with a ball of clay, and I want my ball of clay ideally to be around an inch. This was just a tiny bit under, so we've got a nice round clay. Now I have container of cornstarch. This is cornstarch like you use in the kitchen to thicken things or to dust things. And I have a makeup brush. This is a powder brush. It's a Wet n Wild. I think I got it, I don't know where I got it, Walmart or Dollar Tree someplace. It was a cheap brush, but it's good. We're going to use this to kind of coat our hands. We are going to need a couple of tiny bits of brown clay. And I've got actually a light brown and a dark brown. This is my scrap clay bag. When I get done with a project, if I'm not using a clay that's straight out of the packaging, or if it's picked up spots, I throw it in here. If it's a mixed clay, like a color that I've got left over, like you can see I've got a few pieces of Halloween candy clay, I've got some from the grapes, I've got all different ones here. And they go in here so that I've got little scraps to use when I make projects. I'm going to pull off a couple of browns, a dark brown and a lighter brown. Now, we've got our ball. We're going to pear shape this. Keep your hands coated with cornstarch. That will help to prevent fingerprints and help you to not stick to your clay. I'm going to start by taking that round, and we're just going to go like this. And you could stop there. I'm going to round the top a little more. I want to make it up a little bit thinner at the top and maybe not quite so dramatic there. I've got a toothpick. I'm going to make a little dent. I'm going to turn my real pear around so I'm looking at it. So I want my dent to be off. Oops, I stuck my fingernail in it. If you stick your fingernail in, just use your fingers. And I'm going to kind of use the toothpick to do something like that. Now at the bottom, I want just a little dip at the very bottom. I don't want that to be too steep of a dip. We're going to put a couple of lines out. And a few little marks on your clay is fine because fruit has that when it comes off the tree. And we're going to take our little piece of brown. I've got the darkest of the two browns here. You could use the same color for both, but since I had a dark brown and light brown in there, I thought I'd use them both. Now, this is a dental pick. I picked this up at Dollar Tree. This is one of my favorite clay tools. And I'm kind of trying to break that apart a little bit. And now I am using my dental pick to kind of tease this into a kind of a rough piece. I don't want that to be a smooth ball. I want it to have some chunkiness to it. Now I'm going to take this little piece of brown. I'm going to start a little bit more than that. Making a little ball. Alright, now that's there. So these can go back to my scrap play. Now I have a piece of printer paper because the next step is going to be kind of messy. Get yourself a wet wipe. And this next step is optional, but it adds to the realism. I have some brown chalk. This is artist chalk. I'll show you the package this came from. I've had this for years and years and years. It's Artist Pastels. You could actually use excuse me, cheap makeup. If you can find eyeshadow that doesn't have any glimmer in it, that will work also. But we're going to, you know how pears sometimes have the little speckles? We don't want very many. We just want a few. We want to do this while the clay is still raw, because once it bakes, these will become a permanent part of the clay. And that's all we're going to do. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Get all that chalk off your fingers, because just like that will stick to the clay, so would any off of your fingers. There. Now, I'm going to bake this at 250 degrees for right about an hour. This is a pretty hefty piece of clay, so it's going to take a while to bake. The clay can bake up to 275 degrees. If I'm doing a long bake, I usually drop it down to 250 and then allow it to bake for the recommended time. Usually they say about 15 minutes per quarter inch. I'm going to go about an hour, and that'll be just about right. So I'm going to go do that. I'll probably make a few more off camera, and then when they're all baked and cooled, for the next step they have to be cooled completely, then I'll come back and we will do that next step. Alright, so I've got a couple of pears I baked off. I made the one off camera and the one I made on camera. So now we need to make our pear a yellow color. And pears vary in color. If you've got one, match your paint to the one you've got. What I've got here is some Anita's acrylic paint in Daffodil. It's a really pretty yellow. And I think it will do just fine, but I think I want just a tiniest touch of green. And I have this apple barrel in spring green, and I just want a tiny bit of green. So I put it off to the side. I'm going to put just a little bit in there. A little bit more. And I'm not going to mix it in really thoroughly. I'm going to leave it a little bit there. And now I've got some water. To do that, because I want this to be fairly translucent. I don't want an opaque color on my pear. A little more green in so I can kind of swirl it a little bit. Now that should work. By adding the water, now we can see those cute little freckles, and if you want, you can add a second coat. Maybe got a little more water there than I wanted. Should have put about half that much water in. That's okay. It's all about the experiment. Remember, you can always put more on. You really can't take it back out. So if the first coat is too translucent or transparent, I'll come back and put a second coat on. But I think this is going to be just fine. And see how that chalk dust that we flicked on there, it makes this cute little pear freckles. One I made earlier off camera would stand up. This one won't. Now you do want to make sure you get it down in any creases you've made. If you get it on that brown, I want this to remain pretty brown. I don't want my blossom end to be coated in paint. So I've just got a Q-tip here, cotton swab. There we go. Same with our stem. Now I'm going to set that off to the side to dry. And let's wipe my fingers off so I don't get paint. And we do want to get all the white covered, but we don't want to cover the brown. Now we have a much more realistic looking color than if we would have used a yellow clay. So I'm going to let that paint dry, and when it dries I will come back and we'll see if I think I want to put any more on. In the meantime, I'm going to put a cap over my paint. That will help it to stay wet for a little longer, and since I'm not sure if I'm done yet or not, I'm not going to clean my paintbrush. I'm going to wrap it in a nice fresh baby wipe. That will help keep it moist for a couple of hours, and then I don't have to wash my paintbrush over and over. So when this paint dries, I'll come back and we'll take a quick look and see what it looks like. All right, now there's a couple of spots I missed. That's why I wanted to let them dry. And see, the paint is just as good as it was when I was here earlier. And there's a spot I missed. You can really get in there and look. I love the freckles. I put the chalk on a little heavier than I normally would for the purposes of the video. I love the little freckles that pears have. That's one of my favorite things about looking at pears in real life. All right, so now this coat needs to dry. I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush. And when this is dry, we'll put a clear coat on them. All right, my paint is now pretty much dry, so we are going to put on a coat of just some satin Mod Podge, because while fruit is not super shiny, it's also not matte. A satin finish is really, in my opinion, the best choice for doing most fruits. And Mod Podge is compatible with your polymer clay. There are a lot of things out there that are not polymer clay compatible. And since I'm not 100% sure that my paint is dry, I poured Mod Podge out on my work tray rather than, I very seldom dip directly into the tub of Mod Podge because you run the risk of ruining the entire tub, where if you pour out a little, if you get a paint splatter or paint contamination, you're only ruining a little bit. All right, so now these need to dry, and when they're dry, I will come back and we will look at our finished pears. I have to say I am very pleased with how these turned out, and I'll show you the one I made earlier. I made one using a different color paint. I will try to put the paint color that I used for this one in the blog post. Be sure and check the blog post. I have some photographs that I'm going to put over there, as well as the names of the paints and everything that I can put in, and my thought process as I went. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you learned something. If you did enjoy it, I'd love to have you push that like button and leave me a comment. If you haven't subscribed and you enjoy my content, I invite you to push the subscription button and ring the notification bell so you know when I put up a new video. Check the blog post for pictures, and find us over on Facebook, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.